My name is Michelangelo Flores, and I was recently terminated from KXXV and KRHD, a Scripps property. This is the instrument of my termination. It's on Scripps company letterhead, which is a shame because it is so poorly written and contrived. I'm going to let Randy Lee, the author of this instrument, read it for you.
Results from the review for this activity found that he violated Scripps' social media policy by making disparaging comments about Scripps products brand on January 28th of this year. Further, on February 3rd, you intentionally took unnecessary safety risk instead of accessing the safety accommodations made by the station for safe entry and exit. Both these instances are also a violation of the Scripps Code of Conduct policy. For these reasons, Scripps has made the decision to terminate your employment with the company and KXXV effective immediately.
Okay, let's talk about those disparaging comments. I pored over my posts and found what I believe is the one in question from January 28th. It has to do with some misspellings that I encounter often when reading the website. Time after time, I see stories that have misspellings, typographical errors, grammar errors that make construction awkward. It's just a shame. I suppose I defiled your slogan, "Give light and the people will find their own way," a very 19th century phrase, sort of sanctimonious. So I modified it myself and made it into, we put the EW in news, a reference to EW Scripps. Shorter, catchier, that is verbose. So if that was disparaging, pointing out spelling errors, grammar errors made by the multimedia journalists and playing with the slogan, then I really don't understand what you get all riled up about. Later on in the paragraph, Randy references that on February 3rd, 2022, I intentionally took unnecessary safety risks instead of accessing the safety accommodations made by the station for safe entry into the building, because both these incidents violate Scripps Code of Conduct. My employment was ended immediately. Let's talk about safety, because Randy has the nerve to impugn my regard for safety. Let's talk about safety. Let's go way back. But first, let's go to the recent events of February 3rd. Please note that I am wearing footwear that allows me to negotiate the ice-covered parking lot. Nothing was done to mitigate the ice buildup in the parking lot, by the way. This was the same situation as occurred last year during the big winter storm of 2021 that claimed a couple hundred Texans' lives. Let me also point out that I happened to slip and fall in the parking lot, in that very parking lot, because, again, nothing was done to mitigate the buildup of ice. Texas Department of Public Safety was telling drivers to stay off the roads, and yet news channel employees are expected to show up. In fact, Alan Manning, the operations manager, sent out an email last year reminding people that they had a responsibility to report to work on time in spite of bad weather. So I'm wearing the micro spikes, and I'm coming into work on February the 3rd. I obtained these on my own for my own personal safety because I had past experience with slipping and falling in that very same parking lot. I attempted to get reimbursed for them, but Alan Manning, operations manager, declined my request. Let me note another safety concern from a few years ago I had been with the station for 5 years. The station was having the studio floor painted with some sort of fancy epoxy covering, and there were some harsh vapors that were off-gassing, filling the building that was not properly ventilated for such operations. Several people had headaches. News personnel were allowed to go home. Master Control was not allowed to go home. So because I was developing a headache, before my next shift began, I went to a hardware store, Lowe's, obtained a respirator with organic vapor filters, and turned them in for reimbursement. The business manager at the time reached into the petty cash box and reimbursed me immediately, properly so. We all deserved them. I think a couple other guys did go get them because they couldn't handle the fumes. It was just blatantly unsafe, which is a hallmark of that station, and one that needs to be rectified immediately. You cannot fix their safety problems soon enough. Pertaining to the recent winter storm, the few bags of salt pellets that were on hand were wasted because they were distributed around an area that was covered from the elements. So Randy was speaking about the covered parking, or the wheelchair ramp that a lot of people use to enter and exit the building. Well, there was no memo saying not to use the second backdoor entrance and exit point. It was not marked, it was not labeled, not barricaded, taped off, and you can see in this image that there are other people's footprints. I am coming in for the first time that day, so other people had been using that access point. Where's their reprimand? Please tell me. There is one. Let me tell you the story about the wheelchair ramp being blocked when the general manager at the time, Adam Chase, parked the Chevy Tahoe in such a way as to block access. We had just had a discussion about safety with probably the GM, HR, possibly Randy, Director of Technology, Chief Engineer. And I'd felt that simply speaking to Alan, Operations Manager, was going to fix things. It didn't. Here's a photo of that exchange and how I was warned, and using intimidation tactics, I was warned away from pursuing this matter. Of course, I didn't drop it. I went over Alan's head, as I usually have to. Got the vehicle moved, corrected the error, and the GM and Randy both came to me the next day apologizing for the way it was handled, calling it unfortunate. Let's talk about fire hazards. There are a few. One of the more recent ones involves an extension cord being covered by a rug. Here's a photo. The photo also includes a camera or equipment bag that has been laid out in such a way as to block the path. Somewhere I have a picture of some conduit that's been sticking out of a trash bin. If I can find that one, I'll put it in. A few years ago, I was working a night shift and was contacted by the fire department at the front door. They had been alerted by a passerby. They'd seen sparks flying out of a decommissioned, derelict sign that used to stand in front of the building. It was throwing sparks, producing a fire hazard. The firemen asked for access to the building so they could go to the breaker box, identify the circuit, and deactivate it. Now, I would like to know why that circuit wasn't shut off, tagged, locked out, so that it wouldn't be energized, causing this hazard. Again, that's on Randy. So a fire hazard, sparking sign, rugs, extension cord under a rug, gear bag blocking the path. Most often my complaint was about running in the hallway. There was one guy in particular. There were meteorologists, there was a studio tech that would often run in the hallway. He would feel a misplaced sense of urgency for certain tasks and go running down the hallway. He was probably 6'2", 275 pounds, go barreling down the hallway. Not safe. I even told him not to do it. What did Randy do? Randy reminded me that I have no authority over that guy and that I was not his supervisor. So I had no business pointing out safety concerns to someone. I disagree. I'm of the mind that safety is everybody's job. If we do things the way Randy would have me do them, and if I saw somebody setting fire in the break room, I would have to contact that person's supervisor, right? Most recently, a new technical director has been running through Master Control. Master Control, which has an elevated floor and tiles that can easily be dislodged with some lateral force being applied. Some of them don't fit correctly. Some of them have been cut to make them fit in certain spots, particularly near the sliding door that leads into production control. And when people run over them, they do get dislodged, causing a safety hazard. There shouldn't be running in the building. Why not? I'll explain why. It may not make sense to a lot of people, but here we go. The long and short of it. I have a background in field production for film and television. So we've had this discussion. We have a safety meeting in the morning. When people go running, that is an indication that there exists an emergency situation. So if I'm at work, if I'm setting up a camera or something, and I see somebody go running, that means that an emergency exists, and I should probably drop what I'm doing, look around, and try to figure out if that person is running from a hazard or towards one, possibly to help somebody out. Maybe there's risk to life and limb. So that, again, is an indication that there exists an emergency. If I see somebody running in the building, my training kicks in, and I'm wondering, do we need to evacuate the building? Is it on fire? Is there some other calamity? Is somebody suffering from a health problem, heart attack, or other? That's why you don't run in the building. That's why you don't run on a work site. Open-toed shoes. Studio techs wearing open-toed shoes. One guy in particular named Dylan. I pointed this out to Alan multiple times. He kept doing them. He'd show up, flip-flops, shorts, t-shirt. One night I was working and there was some problem with some studio lighting. Hannah Harold, one of the TDs, said she was going to send Dylan up a ladder in flip-flops to work on the lighting problem. I told her, no, you're not. Usually when I don't understand why when I pointed out safety concerns that there wasn't a mass email, and furthermore, why there wasn't any training. I've had many jobs where orientation involved a safety video to be watched. We have none of that. You don't have that anywhere on your pillars. I recently interviewed for a job or during my orientation, I was happy to see on one of their pillars, safety at the top. Safety along with doing the right thing. Doing the right thing means not letting policy or bureaucracy hamper doing the right thing, which is exactly what Randy is doing. Hiding behind policy, hiding behind bureaucracy in order to fire me because I complain about so many safety concerns. As a whistleblower, I demand protection and satisfaction. There are quite a few others, including how Matt Hines, the chief meteorologist, welcomed me into the building one night. Let's talk about code of conduct. Actually, I'm saving that for a podcast episode. So stay tuned and look for that wherever you download your podcasts. In retrospect, there's a weird pattern there at Channel 25. For some reason, those guys hire the wrong people and they let the wrong people go. If you keep doing that long enough, you wind up with a group of people that can't accomplish anything, no matter how hard they try. Unable to attract and retain good people. And Randy sits there at the cornerstone of that operation, of that mindset. Whatever it is, it's a very, very bad culture and needs to change. And it's been in place since the beginning. I'm not sure why. Possibly because, here's a guess. Randy's brother was once GM, and because of that, he thinks he's a GM too, or he thinks he's second in command, even though he's very poorly qualified for management. Let's go back to Alan Manning. Alan was a master control operator when I was hired, and eventually the supervisor left. It made sense for Alan to become master control supervisor over 3 or 4 guys. Then there was some other mishap. Somebody who should not have been in the building was hired as production manager. She left, and rather than replace her, they just loaded on her duties to Alan, or some of them to Alan, some to maybe somebody in news, maybe the news director or assistant news director. Then along comes that ceiling you hit with the Peter principle. Alan Manning has no personnel management training whatsoever. He exists as a liability to this company. And if you guys don't get him proper management training right away, he's just going to be a disaster or a fall guy. Maybe that's what you want. Maybe you want to set him up to fail there under the wing of Randy. Randy, who promised him that he would never let him fail, but my gosh, Randy is not a leader or a mentor that I would ever want to have. Let's go one more. There's one more example of how Randy is a liability as well. I was present when he blatantly lied to a general manager who was concerned about the lighting in the studio. The studio had just been reset with that new flooring and new lighting, and there was a dead spot, an area that wasn't very well lit. Oh man. And the explanation that Randy gave was that, well, when you zoom in the camera lens, you have to have more light. No, not with these lenses. Not with the lenses we have in the studio. That is simply not true. Let me give you one more. This goes way back. Pre-pandemic, we had a show called Central Texas Living that would shoot in the studio. It would feature guests who would have to travel down the hallway to the studio past master control. I noticed that there was a contractor working in the back of the building, or behind the building, and he had plugged in an extension cord so he could run his power tools. He ran it into the building, down the hall, probably a good 30 or 40 feet into the building. The extension cord was not taped down. It was plugged into an outlet and presented a safety hazard for foot traffic. I noticed this. I asked Randy if we could open up the tool shed in the back of the building, tool shed that I felt had a quad box in it into which he could plug his power tools. The contractor could plug in his power tools. And Randy just looked at me puzzled, like I'd asked him for a peanut butter and squirrel sandwich. Like, well, why do you want to do that? Like, well, it's a safety concern, Randy. There's foot traffic. There's an extension cord not taped down. Why does Randy still work there? I tell you what, this new GM seems to be doing some house cleaning. He's not done. He needs to clean out another front office. the one that has Randy occupying it. That's all for now. When I think of more things to point out, I'll post them, but those are the main things. Randy sought to impugn my regard for safety using this letterhead, which is a shame. The parlance of the day, I can't even. Thanks for your time. I'm Michelangelo Flores. I don't take that. Thanks for watching.